Hey there, it's Blair here at Time Trades. Thanks for joining me this weekend. Okay, we're starting with the Qs, and we're looking at price in TradingView, and we've got the cheat codes visible here. These are the purple and the teal lines, and we've also got the magic levels, which are the white and the orange horizontal lines. And obviously price is in a downtrend here. We're below all 5 of the anchored VWAPs. These are anchored to the 5 most recent cheat code days. And we had a very soft close on Friday, closing down at 324. If we zoom out a little bit and go to a weekly view, which I like to do, we're now at 10 weeks in a row for red bars on the using Heikin-Ashi bars, which I like to use because it tends to smooth out the noise. So very bearish trend here. You have to go back to like 2008 to find the last time that we had 10 weeks in a row red like this. So we're in a very different regime now, and the old habits, the old tactics won't work anymore. You need to adapt to this market. The trend is down. I got a little lucky this week playing a few bounces on the upside. But overall, the smart play, the safe play is to look for additional down moves, at least one more additional down move before this wave is over. I think we're going to be seeing a multi-wave bear market and stocks coming up. That being said, this wave has been very strong and very long, and I think it's due for a bounce. I would not be surprised if we see a probe below this magic level here at 322. It's provided support a couple times, but I don't think it's going to survive a third move down. So I wouldn't be surprised to see it drop down to the magic level below there at 310. And if things really get bad, then we'd be looking at 285, or possibly even halfway between 310 and 285 right over here, which is where the March 2021 drop stopped. So there's a number of, I guess, price targets that we can look at there. So if we zoom in a little bit to the daily, we can see, again, we closed near the bottom here, 324, just above this magic level at 322. I'll be watching this magic level closely, and I'll be watching for a trend change very close to these magic levels this week. So once again, we had a successful trade. I'll give you a little breakdown of how this worked for me. It worked out really well because it was basically what I call a trampoline setup off a magic level here. Basically coming off of one of these probes down, one of these wicks down, I was able to get in and got most of this move up here from here to here. So that was my biggest trade this week, very successful. But again, it's also high risk. So zooming out a little bit, let's take a look at the dailies. I want to pull in another technique I've been using with the cheat codes. And one of the things with the cheat codes that I find happens is when we look at this on the daily, you can see how the cheat codes tend to identify major pivots. So up here on December 29th, down here on January 26th, sometimes it's hard to recognize at the time that this is a pivot. But, you know, with the benefit of hindsight, they are pretty clear. You can see up here, you know, there's some obvious ones, November 22nd. But what happens when they don't hit? Well, when they don't hit like right on, often what happens is roughly halfway between cheat code lines is a pivot. So you can see back here, we're roughly halfway. The day before halfway, that turned into a pivot. Right here, October 4th, that was a nice pivot halfway through. Right here, September 20th, that was a pivot halfway through. So with this information, oh, and of course, when we take a look at this on February 2nd, here's another pivot that was halfway through this this cheat code cycle. So when we look ahead here, what are we seeing? Okay, so we got what we thought was a low, but we could only get sort of half a cycle bounce out of this. So right here, halfway through this cheat code cycle, things turned down on March 2nd and 3rd, really on March 3rd. That's again within a day of halfway through that cheat code cycle. So what does this mean? I am starting to think that we could see one full cycle down from this midpoint here, ending around the 16th and 17th. And there's other reasons for me to think that as well, based on the daily probabilities we're seeing in time trades. So I think the 16th and 17th is going to be a very important date. It's also halfway through the next cheat code cycle. I'm going to be keeping my eye on that date for a potential turn as this wave down, this first wave of what I believe to be a multi-wave bear market gets close to an end. And then we can expect to see a bear market rally coming up out of this time around the 16th and 17th. So let's go into time trades and we'll take a look at some of the forecast details here on the Qs. So we're here. I'm going to zoom in on this a little bit. We're right here, March 14th, and we've got a cluster of 2 standard deviation down days up here, spanning basically the 15th through the 17th. And we also have a 23% probability of a pivot low on March 16th. So it looks like it's going to be a volatile week. We've got some big moves, some pivot lows in the forecast, and coming out of this, a potential for a pivot high looking ahead to March 28th. So I'm I'm coming into this week bearish. I've got some puts in place on the Qs and others, but at the same time, my mindset is to be very nimble, not to get greedy. There's of course some huge news events coming up with the FOMC meeting, although a 1/4 point rise is pretty much baked into the Fed fund futures right now. You never know what's going to happen. It may turn into a 1/2 point rise, and that may trigger a swoosh down in the market on the 16th when that gets announced. Or they may do what's expected, and there's a relief rally coming up out of this on March 16th. So we're going to have to be very nimble here. I'm going to be reducing size coming into this event. Because of course, no one knows what's going to happen exactly. I'm going to be very liquid around this event and looking for an opportunity to play the trend coming out of this, because whatever the trend is coming out of this day, I think that's going to last for a few days here, given the location of that date in between the 2 purple lines, as we talked about. And also given what's happening afterwards, we've got this big pivot high over here. Okay, so that's the Qs. Let's see what's happening with spiders. All right, so when it comes to spiders, it's not quite as clear. We see a 1 standard deviation move down on Monday, and really that's about it. Although we do see the same pivot high around April 1st. How about the Dow? Okay, on the Dow, we see actually a move up on March 16th. So it looks like there's a potential for a bit of a continuation move down here, and then possible move up on the 16th. It's about a 24% probability of a 2 standard deviation move. Okay, let's look at some of the constituents of the Qs right now, starting with Apple. So Apple has a 9% probability of a pivot low on the 16th. That has gone down as the probabilities updated. So this forecast really isn't as bearish as it used to be a few weeks back, and that's okay. But we do see evidence of a nice rally coming up here starting in April. So I think we need to be very nimble here and be aware of a potential for a trend change somewhere between now and early April, because we're starting to see that pop up on the probabilities here. Next up, let's take a look at Google. So Google shows a continuation of this downtrend through to, again, March 16th. That date keeps popping up again and again. And Time Trades does not know when FOMC meetings are. That is not part of the data that it considers. So I find it very interesting that there's all of these pivots that are landing right on the date of the FOMC meeting. And then after that, we've got a pivot high April 1st. So again, looks like a potential for continuation move down into Wednesday, and then a reversal and a move up into early April. Let's look at Amazon. Amazon, I'm having trouble getting a read on this one. I guess in the very, very short term, it looks like a continuation down on Monday, and then some very low probability 1 standard deviation moves for the rest of the week. So I don't think we can learn much, at least for the next part of the week on Amazon. Looking ahead, it looks like it's got a pivot low in early April, moving up into a pivot high on April 18th. Let's look at Microsoft. Microsoft, again, continuation move down on Monday into a 19% probability of a pivot low on March 16th, followed by some moves up again. So again, that sort of confirms our theory of a reversal here centered on March 16th. Now let's take a look at Netflix. So Netflix, again, we've got a small probability, 11% of a 2 standard deviation move up on March 15th, followed by a cluster of 1 standard deviation up moves, ending on April 1st with a pivot high. So again, that's fairly consistent with the other tech stocks that we're seeing. Let's look at NVIDIA. NVIDIA has got, again, a very strong confirmation of this market. It shifted maybe about a day earlier, though. We see a 37% pivot low on March 15th, not the 16th. And then some 1 standard deviation moves up into a pivot high on March 18th. So again, that's telling us we're going to have to be very nimble here. I think there's a lot of shorts and puts outstanding on NVIDIA. With what Time Trades is telling us and with what I'm seeing on the social media feeds, and that just feels like we're getting close to one of those very, very abrupt and strong bear market rallies. Okay, so that's it for stocks. Let's take a look at crypto. We're going to start with Luna, which has been literally going to the moon for the last couple of weeks. And it looks like another booster is going to fire here with a 49% probability of a 2 standard deviation up day on Monday, March 14th. So Luna continues to be in a scenario where I think it makes sense to buy dips. Let's look at Bitcoin. Okay, so what can we see on Bitcoin? It's just really range bound. It's churning away here right around the white magic level at 39K. And it's starting to remind me a little bit of what happened last summer when you know, it basically spent 2 entire cheat code periods down here between June and July of 2021. And then the last cheat code purple period hit, and then it blasted off, right? So we can see that habit with Bitcoin, where sometimes the big rallies tend to kick off with these purple cheat code lines. Another example over here, September 28th, right? Had a little correction coming down from, you know, up here at 52K, corrected down to 40K, cheat code day hits, and then boom, next thing you know, you're at 65. So it feels to me like this is a correction in time, not a correction in price. Totally disagree with all the folks claiming 20K Bitcoin out there. I think we're in the middle of a correction in time, and once we hit March 24th, 25th, we start to see some more probabilities of up days heading up into this pivot high April 11th. And if we look at some other coins, we start to see a very relatively bullish pattern emerge, especially in April. So Ethereum's another example where it looks like we're just going to keep treading water for another few weeks here until early April, when we start to see some very high probabilities of 1 standard deviation up moves. Let's close off with XRP. So XRP has a very interesting and long-lasting cluster of 1 and 2 standard deviation up moves here. So this is something that we should keep an eye on. This has a potential to really outperform a lot of other coins, given both the nature of the 2 standard deviation up moves. I see lots of red here. 2 standard deviation up moves in XRP are, you know, so an average percent increase is 42% over 5 days. Okay, so we're looking at 42% over the bar 4 days prior to the current bar. So that's huge, right? And we see multiple clusters of high probabilities peaking over here in May at 72%. So might be worth, you know, putting a little spot investments into XRP to see if this does indeed play out. Okay, so we're going to wrap up with India here. Let's take a look at ASIANPAINT, which we've been tracking. So after last week's big move down, which we predicted, there was a pretty big recovery in the 4 or 5 most recent trading days. It feels to me like this is a temporary recovery, though, because we see some more probabilities of down days coming up around March 23rd and a big pivot low on March 24th. And that being said, it looks like it's going to take its time making a bottom. We've got another 90% probability of a pivot low on May 4th. So while I don't know if this is a great play for a short right now, but I definitely wouldn't consider it for a long until May 4th, when that cluster of pivot lows completes. Okay, so we're going to look at GAIL. That popped up on the radar here because it has a very nice pattern. I love to see this pattern of a pivot low followed by 2 standard deviation up days. And admittedly, the probability isn't huge, but still, I like to see this combination because what we're seeing here, pivot low, 2 standard deviation up moves, and then a bunch of pivot highs after that. So starting March 24th, March 25th, keep an eye on GAIL. That could be an interesting long. And we will wrap things up with Vedanta. Vedanta is got a little bit of a correction forecast for the coming week that's going to wrap up on the 18th, and we also see a low probability pivot low here of about 15%. After that, a nice long cluster of 1 standard deviation up moves in Vedanta. So it's going to take a bit of a breather here, but by the end of this week, looks like it's a good probability long investment. All right, so that's it for me. Thanks for listening. I appreciate your using time trades. Good luck this week, and we'll talk again next week. Bye now.